a non-Mahayana Buddhist school so that we can see how Buddhism evolved over the first few centuries after the Buddha's lifetime, and how that influenced the present day of Buddhism as we know it now. So, first we have to look at how the early Sangha developed. As we know, the first community that the Buddha himself founded, they were a wandering community. They sort of pretty much kept traveling, except during the rainy season in India, during which it was more convenient to stay put, so as not to interfere with agriculture and various other things. So this pattern of the regular rains retreat, as well as the eventual endowments to the Sangha of land and properties and buildings and so forth by wealthy supporters, led to more static communities, which could truly be referred to as monastic, and geographically distinct sanghas. And by the development of these monastic communities, the monks were better able to preserve the Buddha's teachings through repetition and study, and they also became places where lay followers could go to hear the teachings. It's important to be aware of certain political influences represented by kings, basically, that also affected the development of Buddhism in India. There was modest spread of the Buddha's teachings during about the first 100 years after the Buddha's lifetime. A very important figure that I'm just going to touch on here, but he's probably worthy of further study, is King Asoka, who was a fairly brutal conqueror and warrior, but who eventually became disgusted with his own brutality and converted to Buddhism. He renounced the use of force and instead embarked upon what he referred to as the conquest by the Dharma in an effort to actually improve the lives of his subjects. And he had a lot of influence in the development and the spread of Buddhism. He didn't get involved himself in trying to alter the teachings, but through his political influence, he was able to facilitate the spread of Buddhism, the development of communities, and also he got involved in the facilitation of Buddhist, particularly one Buddhist council, the Third Buddhist Council. So he wouldn't have gotten involved in actually altering the teachings in any way, but he used his political influence to facilitate disputes and solving of disputes and so forth. So this Third Buddhist Council took place in Pataliputra, and this is a very, very brief summary of what happened, but basically some non-Buddhists or some monks were admitted to the order who were not properly ordained or properly trained, and 1,000 monks gathered to refute the views of this offending Sangha, which was later codified as the Kata Batu, or the points of controversy, and which are now included in the Theravadan Abhidhamma. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. The Fourth Buddhist Council took place several centuries later under King Kanishka. He was in the first and second centuries of the Christian era, and he was ruling in northern and northwest India, which explains why the Fourth Council took place at Kashmir, which, as we know, is in the northwest. And at this council, 499, or 500, Sarvastivada monks compiled a new canon and codified their doctrines in a commentary called the Mahavipasa. And we'll get into more detail about the Sarvastivadi school in a minute. So basically there's three types of schools. The first would be Nikayas. And as I understand from my reading, a Nikaya is almost synonymous with a particular Sangha in a local community. And these would be based on variations in the Vinaya. Then there are schools whose ending is Vada, like Sarvastivadin, Theravadin, based on variations in doctrine. And then the third type are the philosophical schools, which would be outgrowths of the doctrinal schools. There's a concept of Sangha Veda, or schism, which is important to understand. These splits in Buddhism have always been defined as resulting from the adoption of different codes of behavior, or different vinayas, rather than different interpretations of dogma. So if I'm correct, the Vinaya is almost more important to the monastic community than doctrinal differences. Causing a split in the Sangha was one of the 6 heinous crimes, really one of the worst offenses for a bhikkhu monastic, on a par with harming the Buddha or murdering a parent. So it's taken very seriously. And obviously this is only relevant to the monastics because they're the ones that follow Vinaya, not lay people. It's important also to understand that not all splits were intentional or adversarial. What I've read is that you shouldn't sort of overemphasize the splits that occurred over the years. For instance, geographical isolation may have contributed to variations in the pratimoksha's, the rules recited by different gatherings of monastics. And this led to some insignificant differences, such as the kinds of robes that monastics wore, or the color, and so forth. So we can see that these are not really serious differences. Doctrinal variations, on the other hand, this is very interesting, I think. A doctrinal allegiance was a more personal matter, which led to a situation in which monks could live together under the same Vinaya, but within that Vinaya, they could be subscribing to different doctrinal schools, which I think is really interesting. And what could have led to such a situation? Beginning with the Buddha himself, he refused to appoint a successor as the head of the Sangha. Some of his last words to Ananda were that the monks should remain as islands to yourself. So it's clear that the Buddha was trying to avoid a very centralized, monolithic, organized structure for his followers. And so this has persisted to the present day. Also, with the geographical spread of the teaching, the discourses and the Vinaya began to appear in different dialects and languages. And understandably, this could lead to different interpretations. So we have this sort of dual process, or very closely related process of specialization and diversification. Monks would specialize in the recitation of particular sutras or groups of sutras, or of the Vinaya, and eventually of the Abhidharma texts. Similarly, monks would group themselves around teachers who were themselves specialists in one aspect of Dharma Vinaya. And this diversification, I think, can be seen as a healthy development when we consider the metaphor of the Buddha as a physician with specific medicines to treat specific illnesses. So there's room for variation while we still maintain the core teachings of the Dharma. So this chart is just a little summary of the philosophical schools, the main philosophical schools that developed. The non-Mahayana would be the Sarvastivadin and the Sautrantika, which I'll elaborate on. And then the Mahayana schools would be the Madhyamaka and Yogacara, which I'm sure we'll also hear lots about from Don. So these schools are ones that can be seen as having made a very distinct and far-ranging contribution to the intellectual climate within India at the time, versus doctrinal schools which advocated teachings that really made no great impact outside of their own circle. So that's what qualifies the school's inclusion as philosophical schools. So, non-Mahayana schools, I believe that there were 18 in all by the Middle Ages. but that the ones I'm going to talk about are ones that were mentioned most frequently by Chinese pilgrims in India in the medieval period. So I'm going to talk and summarize these five: Mahasangika, Staviravan, Kudgalavadan, Sarvastavadan, and Sautrantika. Beginning with Mahasangika. It broke off within about 100 years after the Buddha's death, sort of spread between the first and second councils. Maha, as you may know already, means large or greater, and it was named this because the disputants were the greater part of the monks at the time. The other side became known as the Staviras, or elders. And when I first came across that word, the Staviravan, I thought, is this just an alternate spelling of Theravadan? And it is related, but it's not the same. So we have the Staviras versus the Mahasangikas. The Stavira means elder, and in fact it did later evolve into the Theravadan school. The Mahasangikas, or the greater part of this dispute, opposed the insertion of additional rules to the Vinaya by an elder monk at the time. And that was what led to the initial split. They upheld the doctrine of the supramundane Buddha. Lokotara is the word in Pali, meaning that they viewed Siddhartha Gautama as not merely human. And included in this, they held that he had a miraculous birth. Additionally, they questioned the status of the arhant. They questioned the perfection of arhants and their accomplishments. And they also emphasized the Buddha's career as a bodhisattva prior to his last life as Siddhartha Gautama, and that this career as a bodhisattva progressed through stages known as bhumis. This should bring to mind a foreshadowing of anyone? What does this remind you of ideas that are current?
Like philosophical, is that what you're referring to?
Well, it foreshadows the whole Mahayana tradition, doesn't it? The bodhisattva. The Staviravan school is the only non-Mahayana school to have survived into the modern period as Theravada Buddhism. And as I mentioned, Thera in Pali is equivalent to Stavira in Sanskrit. So we can understand the Theravada school as representative of the prior Staviravan school, but not really identical. It was conservative in its doctrines and practices. It held that there's only one bodhisattva at present, which is Maitreya. It did uphold the perfection of arhants, claiming that they were incapable of regression and equal to the Buddha in their attainments. And there was an emphasis on a theoretical analysis of the teachings. And an example of this is Buddhaghosa in the 5th century and his work, the Visuddhimagga. The Kudgalavadan school is named for the Sanskrit word Kudgala, which means person, and it flourished between the 3rd century BCE into the 9th or 10th century of the Christian era, so it had a long innings. It had a very strong following. Again, estimates by Chinese visitors to India in the 7th century were that a majority of non-Mahayana monks were actually subscribers of the Kudgalavadan teachings. And these consisted of believing that the Buddha's teaching on non-self, or anatta, was true, but this was on a conventional level, but that ultimately they felt that personhood had to be seen as a real thing, that there was some element of personhood that was necessary to account for continuity between rebirths, to account for memory, and for for the carrying on of karma. They felt that without this idea of pudgala or personhood, that moral action was not possible because karma could not ripen.
Sharon, is it some
Yeah.
of the idea of like a soul?
As I understand it, something like that.
Okay.
Something like that.
That continues?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's my understanding. The book that I was reading offered these two possible rationales for the Pudgala doctrine, that it may have been a reaction to the depersonalizing effect of the Abhidharma, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is covered really nicely in this book, or a persistent attempt within Buddhism to give a positive account of what is real. This is something that can be debated, I suppose. The Sarvastivadin school possibly originated as a result of the Third Council, which was, as we mentioned, was held in northwest India, where I said it was the 499 or 500 Sarvastivadin monks established their canon at the Fourth Council under King Kanishka. And their doctrine survived for 1,000 years and ultimately arrived in China. It was this school that originated the Abhidharma. And this, did you have copies of this for everybody, or is this available? Is there an online version of this?
It's still available online. When I bought it, they had only 3 copies
Oh,
left.
right. Well, if you just look at the Abhidharma, it's referred to as the higher teachings, or special teachings. This book summarizes it as saying it's unique in its abstruseness, analytical approach, immensity of scope, and conduciveness to one's liberation. So it sounds like a very daunting work. The Sarvastivadins also questioned the absolute status of the Arhat. The name comes from the Sanskrit sarvam asti, which means all exists. And again, they're trying to deal with a mechanism for memory and karma, just as the Pudgalavadins did. But their approach was to claim that time, past, present, and future time, actually coexisted as modes between which dharmas and events could move. They also questioned, in the Triple Jewel, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, they had some, it sounds very subtle to me, but some quibble with assigning the Buddha as one of the jewels as a human being. So they held that the Buddha jewel consisted of all the pure dharmas that made up the Buddha as an enlightened being, that is, his knowledges and his skandhas. Again, I don't really understand the full difference between, well, that was one of their teachings. They also promoted the practice of the 6 perfections, which we know as the 6 paramitas: generosity, morality, patience, energy, meditation, and wisdom. Sarvastivadins also originated the Wheel of Life icon or imagery, which you may have seen. It represents the 6 realms of existence connected with the 12 links of dependent origination. And this was commonly painted in their monasteries, and it's preserved in the present day in the Tibetan tradition in particular. The Sautrantika school arose as a reaction to the commentarial trend, such as, I believe, the Abhidharma and other manuals and treatises. The name means ending with the sutra, Sautrantika. So they held that the canon ended with the Sutra Pitaka and rejected the Abhidharma, that higher teaching, the more technical, abstruse set of teachings. They rejected the Sarvastivadin concept of the 3 modes and instead asserted that all dharmas had only momentary existence, not that they somehow traveled between past, present, and future. From this, it followed for them that direct perception of an object is not possible, and that to deal with the idea of karma, they proposed that actions perfumed the mental continuum. This developed into the idea of bijas, or seeds, planted by an action, which sprouted at a later time when conditions allowed. So they were able to dispense with the idea of personhood, and I think from this came the idea of the substrate consciousness, which actually continues between lifetimes. That's the end of that slideshow. Does anybody have any questions about any of that or comments? It's a very quick summary of a lot of material.
So the idea of seed is kind of like the beginning of an inclination, like where, like Master, when you were talking about, there's these times of great danger where there's like something starts to pop up and you see another way to go, but it's also potential, so it could be.
My understanding is that
or
an intentional action is a seed. Please somebody correct me if I'm wrong, is this it? An intentional action is a seed, and that plants a karmic potential, which then ripens when conditions allow. Is that correct? Aegis? I know Don has taught on this before.
Ideally, you can say that.
Okay, close enough,
nicely
I
done.
think you still can do one more talk, same topic, same this, different school by geography map
Oh, yes, okay.
and show what century, where they start from, and then when they travel, when they go, and then when they merge together, all this school, then you will see why they have this kind of thinking,
Oh.
why the idea come out from, because of sometimes they come together and they explore something, they will come to the new understanding. Why when they come to one corner, they have their own thing, but they don't found the other groups of people what they think. When they come together, they suddenly saw what they do, and then they found, discover the new thing. All this sex of school is like that. So when you come to the map, you can see why it's more clearly. I study in my school, it's not like that.
The non-Mahayana, the talking about personhood
Yeah,
and the memories,
yeah.
and how does that contrast? I know it's all subtle and it's something, how does that contrast from the Mahayana view of no self? And you're not talking about self though, it's like, it's some,
Person attached.
because I know, like the one sutta the Buddha that describes the candle and the flame, and something, words don't really do it justice, but so they're trying to put it in words like this personhood or something.
Yeah, I mean,
What is it that continues?
like how are we supposed to interpret this?
Yeah, I mean, because I've read where you can use consciousness as a
There are
word.
8 consciousnesses.
Yeah,
And
and of course there's the karma part of it.
there's a substrate consciousness, and I can't think right now of its Sanskrit name. Sorry. Alayavijnana. And that this is the place where like the seeds are planted, and this is where the karma is. It's not part of your person or your identity,
Right.
but it's what flows underneath. It's what individual consciousnesses spring out of, as I understand it.
If you use the seeds to explain something that's more close to yoga chemistry, and from that, it is viewed from non-regular point, they don't say it's a separate, they talk about everything except the code.
I'm sure you'll hear more from Don about that.
I'm gonna talk about Baby Charles.
Great, great. Okay, great.
And,
We'll hear more.
the question I think that was asked had to do with about the consciousnesses and
Yeah.
whether or not there's the proposition of a soul,
Mhm.
those kinds of things. And so this problem is a very subtle point. Very subtle point, and our dear friend Tom Trump-Jung is very concerned about clarifying this subtle point. So he risked his life to bring us a teaching about the very subtle point. So I'll try to explain my very small understanding of this very big subtle point. Right.
Excellent.
Right.
Okay, great.
Because see, if you attach to no self,
Yeah.
this is another kind of problem.
Uh-huh.
So between self and no self, there is a subtle point.
Mhm. Okay, we'll hear more about that later. I wanted to know if anybody attempted my homework assignment, which dealt with the Chula Vidala Sutra, which Kathleen introduced us to, the shorter set of questions and answers. I suggested that we try breaking that down into more graphic representations. Did anybody have a go at that? Does anybody, if anybody did have a go at it, would you like to maybe just sketch out even a part of it, because it's very long, I know. I have my own attempt on the PowerPoint, but I'd love to see what anybody else managed. Anybody? No?
No homework?
You did some. I can see you did. Why don't you just put a piece of it on the whiteboard for us, just so we see what you did with it. Because I know it's huge. Mhm. That's fine, yeah, just a small part.
Sharon, can you spell that?
C-U-L-A, V-E-D-A-L-L-A. It's on the, maybe find out from me about the class forum if you haven't explored Great, okay, good. Yes, so you did it in a more horizontal form, what I did vertically, so that's great. So what, the sutra begins by asking, this is a dialogue between Dhammadina, the nun, who was so accomplished, and her former husband, Visakha. And his first question is, what is the self-identification described by the Blessed One? So she describes the 5 clingings to form, feeling, perception, fabrications, and consciousness, which we also know as the... Good. What is the origination of self-identification? And she explains that craving is the origination of it, and that the path is the cessation, and the path is the Noble Eightfold Path. And this again is modeled on the 4 truths. Yes.
I think she said more that the origination of it was the misidentification of the 5 aggregates as a self. And then
Okay.
this is supported by the craving.
Very good. Thank you. Yes, I left a lot out that I didn't understand. That I didn't know how to graphically represent. Thank you for the clarification. There was, oh yes, and are the three, okay, they talk about the Noble Eightfold Path, and then are the three aggregates included under the Noble Eightfold Path, or is the Noble Eightfold Path included under the three aggregates? And so she replies that the steps of the path, the Noble Eightfold Path, are included under the three aggregates, which we know is virtue, concentration, and wisdom, with the 8 stages divided this way. Does anybody else want to give a go on the board? Now that we've got you started, anybody else have a go at any of these parts? Like, what is concentration? Concentration is singleness of mind. Its themes are the 4 frames of reference. Its requisites are the 4 right exertions. Does anybody know what those are? 4 right exertions. I don't know if that actually specified in here. They are to prevent the arising of non-skillful qualities, to abandon non-skillful qualities that have arisen, to promote the arising of skillful qualities, and to maintain skillful qualities that have arisen. Those are the 4 right exertions. And the development of concentration is the cultivation, development, and pursuit of these qualities. Then there's a question on what are fabrications. And there are 3 kinds of fabrications: bodily, consisting of in and out breaths; verbal, consisting of directed thought and evaluation; and mental, consisting of perceptions and feelings. Again, I'm skipping over a lot and just sort of going to parts that are easy to graphically represent. Talked about different kinds of feelings, the pleasant, non-pleasant, and neutral. And then getting into the discussion of obsessions. What obsession gets obsessed with a pleasant feeling? What obsession gets obsessed with painful feelings? And what obsession gets obsessed with neither pleasant nor painful feelings? And it's a passion obsession gets obsessed with the pleasant feeling. Resistance obsession gets obsessed with painful feelings, and ignorance obsession with neutral feelings. Does that make sense?
A bit of a puzzle.
Yeah.
Because I think that maybe it's just the polarity that is in the first 2 that make it very easy
Mm-hmm.
to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think it arises from my own confusion about what neutral means. I think before we've talked about neutral, actually, it means that you don't, it's not about neutral as I thought about before, it means like neither having a preference or an aversion. But in a state of ignorance, you don't have preference or aversion because you don't know. As opposed to what I thought of before as neutral being kind of a good thing. Because it's neither having passion nor resistance, because you've abandoned those inclinations, and so you're just kind of in the middle.
Yeah, I've had the same puzzlement over this too. Anybody else have any?
Well, I think that's before you get to that point. You have a response to pleasant feeling or painful feeling, and then a neutral feeling is neither one of those.
Right.
But I understand what you're saying, but if you get to a higher level, then everything's more neutral anyway.
Yeah.
Is that the same as equanimity though?
Yeah, well, that's what she's talking about, equanimity. But this is before you get to
Yeah.
that.
I mean, you could almost say, like, if you're not feeling aversion or attraction,
Then you just don't
you
care.
don't
You just
notice
Right.
anything, right? Which is ignorance.
It is.
If it's pleasant, you want it.
Yes.
And you're
Right.
grabbing it. If it's painful, you're pushing it away. If it's neutral, you ignore it.
Yes, you're.
So for instance, if there's a person about whom you don't feel anything, you may ignore that person. Okay. If there's a
Right.
person, for instance, about whom you have neutral feelings, like someone behind you in line at the store or something, you may have no concern for that person. You don't want to help them, you don't want to hurt them, you just ignore them, which is not right view toward that person, because you're not having
That's not,
compassion, correct, it's more like empathy. You're ignoring that person, you don't feel anything for that person, so you ignore them. You're ignorant of their importance, because they don't bring you pleasure or pain, so you see them important.
Right. Yeah.
There's that,
Is that turned on? I'm not sure.
It's not sure it's on.
Turn on.
Ron,
There you go, thank you.
on page 5, there's a sentence or a little short paragraph. It says pleasant feeling is pleasant in remaining and painful in changing. Painful feeling is painful in remaining and pleasant in changing. And neither pleasant nor painful feeling is pleasant in occurring together with knowledge, and painful in occurring without knowledge. So like this would be, on the board would be more without knowledge. I think.
I remember my teacher said about neutral. It bring an, I don't need that. It bring an example. It said when a monk wear the robe, you know, and then when you pass to the wood, and something, you know, break your robe, you will be very, you know, that is a painful feeling come. If something that say, oh, your robe is beautiful, that is something come. That is a feeling can be very easy to understand. You know, like you going to the wood, if the leaf drop, you know, to your roof, you don't feel it because it not make your dirty, make your roof dirty, and it will not hurt your roof. Then that is a neutral. Neutral means you don't care, but it's still some feeling there. But that feeling that you don't have up and down, you don't care. It means you ignore it.
yeah.
You know, that's called neutral.
So, I think I can do pretty well. I don't think I need a microphone either.
for the people who are online, it's
Oh,
not for
okay.
us people. Yeah.
Are we, and I don't know, I'm just throwing this out here, I don't know it all, but are we maybe being too literal in how we're interpreting the word ignorance, maybe? Is what I feel what's going on. We're almost thinking ignorance means a complete misunderstanding. I'm just throwing that out there.
We're just ignorant about ignorance.
We're ignorant about ignorance, because I think what's happening. Thank you, Kathy, that's what I was trying to say.
I think we can understand ignorance as itself a neutral term. It just means lack of knowledge.
Right.
It doesn't mean,
Or even as Master Jewer said, a lack of knowledge or just a lack of feeling.
yeah.
I think that's what I think. I think we might be misinterpreting that word and thinking it means that we're unknowledgeable. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Whereas it could be much more subtle, as if it's something that we are ignoring, as Master Jewer said, because we don't have a feeling associated. It's just something that happened.
Right.
Too much.
Yeah.
Okay, enough.
Anybody else concerned about that? Then I think this is the conclusion then, the path to unbinding. This is very interesting exchange. What's his name? Visakha asks, now what lady lies on the other side of pleasant feeling? She answers, passion lies on the other side of pleasant feeling. And what lies on the other side of painful feeling? Resistance lies on the other side of painful feeling. And what lies on the other side of neither pleasant nor painful feeling? Ignorance lies on the other side of neither pleasant nor painful feeling. And whereas the first two sort of they stop, you know, This one continues, and what lies on the other side of ignorance? Clear knowing lies on the other side of ignorance. What lies on the other side of clear knowing? Release lies on the other side. What lies on the other side of release? Unbinding. And then he says, and what lies on the other side of unbinding? And she says, you've gone too far, friend Visakha. You can't keep holding on up to the limit of questions.
There we go. That's all right.
Can we use this with our children and grandchildren? What do you think that's one of
It
these?
says, you've gone too far, friend Visakha. You can't keep holding on up to the limit of questions.
We have to explain that to the kids because they don't understand that either.
If you refer him to a higher authority, if you wish, go to the Blessed One and ask him the meaning of these things. So,
So go to the master if you have
any other observations about this sutra or questions or things you want to share?
I just thought it was really neat because it had a woman monastic, but basically explaining Four Noble Truths and origin of self,
Yes,
which
yes.
doesn't happen very often.
Right, right. No, it's really, I was really glad to be introduced to this sutra.
I really like that after she got annoyed with him and sent him to Buddha, Buddha was like, yeah, she's right, it's her.
Yes,
What
yes.
she said.
That's right. Yes.
I kind of agree with Tracy, and not that agree, but I mean I get kind of enlightened by the term she used, the ignorant and attachment to the term ignorant. I know that we need not to attach to something, but sometimes we still kind of living here, so we have some attachment there. Maybe we have a different, a more positive rendering of the word ignorant we use here. Master Chiru used the term don't care. Actually, you know, because I myself right now seeing these two, I have a moment of not being able to connect between ignorant and clear knowing. I think that ignorant is one of the very first important in the 12th link of the, yeah, whatever. I'm not very good with English here. So if we put in a more neutral or a more positive word of ignorant, it will change the progression, help me at least change the progression very good from that is a good quote unquote positive state that it will bring you to unbinding.
There's an interesting work in the Christian mystical tradition called the cloud of unknowing. And I don't know if that's the kind of idea you're getting at, unknowing, which is actually a potential, as I see it, for clear knowing. You know, as you sort of dropping your concepts, dropping your, you know, the ideas that you cling to. And that kind of positive ignorance might be what you're thinking of?
No, actually you know. Actually you know, for example, you see something that it makes you comfortable, pleasant, something you like, it brings you a passion and you make it you feel pleasant. Something you don't like, the bad experience come to your mind, you feel painful. However, neutral is the one that somebody mentioned earlier here, is that yes, the pleasant arise, but it doesn't make me feel, the passion arise, but it does not make me feel good. And the bad things arise, but it does not make me feel bad, kind of sorrow. That is the part that where later on the third one in the previous slide you say it's ignorant, neutral. Actually it is not ignorant to cause you that feeling, neutral. Now that you realize that it doesn't bother you anymore. Not that it doesn't matter. It doesn't bother you anymore. Doesn't matter is on the external word, but internally it doesn't bother you anymore. That's from where you get to the clear knowing.
Aren't
Yes.
you talking about detachment?
Yeah.
I don't think it's.
It's talking about equanimity and detachment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between ignorance and detachment.
Right, so that's why I'm trying to bring up the difference between the term, the term ignorant here. I hope that we can all detach ourselves from the terminology, but since we are not, so sometimes if we choose the term more positive in that way, make the flow of understanding and make the flow of improvement, I mean, easier to transition. I sit here, now I see it. It is the first time I saw ignorant, clear knowing. I was shocked, and then I realized that the ignorant may not be a right, not the right or wrong, but maybe a proper rendering of that state.
Well, we also, I don't know, I think, what does it mean? What does Damadina mean when she says it lies on the other side of? I'm not sure I fully understand the dynamic of what she's explaining.
She's moving from uninstructed worldling, is what she starts off with the pleasant feeling, the painful feeling, and the neutral feelings, and then she compares that with the one who is instructed in the Dharma, and how they change all of that.
Right, so there's a transformation
The first three on your
implied.
slide were the uninstructed.
Right.
And then
Yeah.
when one is instructed, it changes.
According to the four foundation of mindfulness, when we talk about feeling, they have 5 kinds of feeling. The instructed mind and the uninstructed mind. Uninstructed mind is these 3 kinds of feeling. And the one who cultivate his mind to joy and equanimity, that is 2, kind of a feeling who influenced by the Dhamma and got the right, freedom from the Dhamma. Then we talk about the joyful feeling and the equanimity of the feeling. So that is not the neutral. When someone have the experience about the transition, they have some kind of feeling, but that is not the neutral. The neutral only one who not practice, they still have a very common mind state, up and down, or you just not care, but it's still something going on for them. You just not care because it's not related to your clean, your grabbing.
Can ignorance be pleasant or painful, and then you just pretend it doesn't exist, even though you think it does? Like you're blacking it out? Like you ignore that your bills are due, but then I don't know if you could force yourself to ignore pleasant.
That is more aversion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
If
mean, that's
your
what I
will
was
is
thinking.
painful and you don't want to think about it, you avoid it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's aversion of the painful feeling that you get if you did have to do it.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we kid ourselves into,
Yeah, I
turning
thought
it back.
maybe there's a difference between using something to avoid.
Here.
That's pretty much it. I was thinking maybe.
Yeah, flip it up.
A difference between using some sort of a drug, whatever it is, to avoid, or just pretending it doesn't exist.
Using some drugs to it.
Like any kind of drug, shopping or something,
Oh, yeah,
whatever life drug you choose,
right.
or just ignoring completely.
It's clinging to the pleasure from shopping or the drug and denying the pain.
Yeah.
And then it is your,
Yeah.
so it's usually clinging and aversion.
It seems like, I wonder, is there a connection between, sort of a more positive understanding of what ignorance means in her construction is that what's on the other side of ignorance is clear knowing, much as what's on the other side of doubt is faith, like the way we define says so. You know, or Buddha says so, it's because we have our own experience and all of these other things that doubt usually is thought of as being something very negative. Oh, I doubt, but it's actually what, if you have the right intention, if you have the right, if you have, so if doubt is a positive stepping stone, because if you have the right intention, then it takes you deeper into your practice. So you have, okay, I have doubt about this meditation work, but I do it because I look around me and I have a little bit of faith, right? Because I see confidence. Right, and so ignorance is the same kind of a thing. You have ignorance, but if you come to this not with like a full cup, if you come with the empty cup, then you keep going up and you keep going until you get to clear knowing.
And the doubt she's referring to as noble doubt.
Right.
Yeah, in Chinese, ignorant, we have another definition. We have a little bit the idea of stupid.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, and I want to say something. You know, the night I go for the funeral service, and the father, the mother, and his small brother, three of them, very strong alcohol when we hug together. You know, I can feel that they want to keep themselves more released from that kind of pressure. So they drink a lot in order to make the mind a little bit not too strong feeling, so they can feel a little bit more in the neutral side. Can you feel that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is how the mind find a way out. They don't know how to find a way out. So they just use something that they think that this thing can help them, even though temporarily they want to relief. That is called some ignore. Yeah. So I strongly feel that it's very painful. So I keep my word very strong and take but I couldn't say that to hurt people, but I just, because of their reason, they bring me, you know, can you want to say something?
So anyway, just to sum up, this is a really good discussion. It just occurs to me that in an attempt to combat ignorance in our own lives, and it's worth sort of studying all of these types of feelings in our own lives, and the only way to do that really is through the practice of mindfulness. So again, we're brought back to that idea of being as mindful as possible about through our days, like what are we feeling attracted to, what are we feeling aversion toward, and you know, if we're not feeling much of anything, what's going on there. So we can go forth and practice more about that. So that's the end of my talk.